Inside that metal train car cutting through the November rain, a baby screamed with the kind of desperation that makes strangers uncomfortable. His mother's eyes were closed, her hands trembling as she rocked him uselessly. The entire car was tense, filled with sighs and side glances and the suffocating weight of collective judgment. For 15 unbearable minutes, that cry pierced through headphones, through newspapers, through every barrier 40 passengers tried to build between themselves and someone else's crisis. Then silence. Swift, stunning, impossible silence. Everyone turned. A black teenage girl was holding the baby. And he was smiling. Not just quiet. Smiling. Like she'd whispered something the universe had been waiting to hear. What happened in those seconds would tear through the media like wildfire. It would end up in courtrooms and boardrooms, on book covers and in foundation mission statements. One moment. One girl. One choice that proved kindness can be the most dangerous, most powerful thing you'll ever offer a stranger. This is that story. And I promise you, you've never heard anything like it. They say you can measure a society by how it treats its most vulnerable. That November morning on the 906 Metro eastbound, 40 people failed that test. All except one. Her name was Keisha Williams, and she had every reason to stay in her seat, to mind her business, to protect herself from the risks that come with being a young black girl reaching for a white woman's child. But she didn't. And what happened next would change multiple lives forever. Because this isn't just a story about a crying baby. It's about the price we pay for compassion. It's about who gets punished for caring and who gets rewarded for cruelty. It's about a billionaire's wife who had everything except what mattered, and a poor girl who had nothing except the one thing that could save them both. Jennifer Harding was wealthier than most people could imagine. Married to finance mogul Robert Harding III, her days should have been champagne brunches and designer baby clothes. But dreams crumble quietly when the lights go out, and theirs had been flickering for years. 1 year before that train ride, Robert disappeared to Dubai for business meetings. Jennifer gave birth alone in a private hospital room, staring at white walls while nurses congratulated her with practiced smiles. The postpartum depression hit like a wave she couldn't see coming. Then came surgery complications, the infection that kept her bedridden for weeks, the nanny who quit because Robert refused to pay her properly. Now here she was, riding a public train with 6-month-old Ethan, and a heart so broken she could barely feel it beating. She had money in her bank account but no one to call. She lived in a penthouse but felt homeless. Ethan cried constantly and she didn't know why. The pediatricians found nothing wrong. Sleep consultants charged thousands and delivered nothing. Every cry felt like proof she was failing. That morning she had a mandatory appointment downtown, paperwork about Robert's assets she didn't understand. She couldn't miss it, not with lawyers breathing down her neck. So she bundled Ethan up and took the train because her driver had quit too. Have you ever felt so alone that a crowded room felt like a desert? That's where Jennifer was living. Now let me tell you about Keisha Williams. 17 years old, high school junior, raised by her grandmother since she was 7 after her mother disappeared into addiction. Keisha and her grandmother lived in a small apartment in the South Bronx where the radiator clanked all night and the neighbors' music bled through thin walls. They had love, not money. Keisha studied classical piano on YouTube, sold handmade soaps at the weekend market, and babysat her cousins. When she wasn't doing homework in laundromats, she dreamt about growing up safe, about a life where she didn't have to choose between buying lunch and saving for college. Her grandmother, Miss Ruth, had raised 6 children and helped deliver dozens more back in Alabama. She had hands that knew how to soothe, a voice that carried wisdom earned through decades of listening. Keisha remembered her grandmother's words clearly, spoken one evening while they folded laundry. In every crying baby child there is a mystery. Don't speak harsh, just listen. You might be the one chosen to understand them. Keisha had spent her teenage years helping raise her cousins, twin boys who came to stay when her aunt got sick. She knew the difference between a hungry cry and a lonely one. She knew that sometimes babies cry not because something is wrong with them, but because something is wrong around them. That November morning, Keisha was heading to school, running late because the twins had hidden her biology textbook. She had a test third period she couldn't miss and a shift at the corner store right after. The train was packed, smelling like wet coats and coffee. She found a spot near the middle doors, wedged between a man reading the paper and a woman with grocery bags. That's when she heard it. A baby's cry rising above the train's rhythm. At first, like everyone else, she tried to ignore it. Babies cry. Parents handle it. But this cry was different. It wasn't just loud, it was frantic, escalating, the kind of cry that signals genuine distress. Keisha looked up and saw the mother. A white woman, expensively dressed but disheveled, her silk blouse wrinkled, her hair uncombed. The woman's hands were shaking as she bounced the baby, her eyes squeezed shut like she was trying to disappear. The baby, a chunky little boy with red cheeks and tears streaming down his face, was arching his back, fighting against every attempt to comfort him. 10 minutes passed. The crying intensified. Keisha watched as passengers shifted uncomfortably, as a businessman put in earbuds, as an older woman muttered something about controlling your children. She watched the mother's face crumble, watched her whisper what looked like "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And Keisha felt something her grandmother had taught her to recognize. A call. Not audible but unmistakable. She stood up, her backpack sliding off her shoulder. Her heart was pounding because she knew how this could look. A black girl approaching a white woman's baby on a train. She knew the risks, the assumptions, the danger. But the call was louder than the fear. Keisha walked over slowly, making herself visible, non-threatening. She stopped a respectful distance away and spoke softly. "Excuse me, miss. I don't mean to intrude, but would you like me to try? Maybe a different person, different energy might help." Jennifer opened her eyes. They were bloodshot, exhausted beyond measure. For a moment, Keisha thought she'd say no. Instead, Jennifer looked at her and something passed between them, woman to woman, exhaustion to compassion. "Please," Jennifer whispered. "Please, I don't know what else to do." Keisha stepped closer and gently reached for Ethan. The baby was hot, his little body rigid with crying. She brought him to her chest, turned him slightly so his ear rested against her heartbeat, and began to hum. Not a song exactly, just a low, steady sound her grandmother used to make, a rhythm older than words. She swayed gently, ignoring the stares, ignoring everything except this small human in her arms. She thought about the twins, about the nights she'd walk them through colic, through nightmares. She thought about her grandmother's hands and tried to channel that same calm. Ethan's cries began to falter, hiccuping into quieter sobs. Keisha touched his tiny hand, let him grip her finger. She hummed a little louder, adding a melody now, something from a Mozart piece. The baby's eyes, big and brown, fixed on her face. His breathing slowed. And then, silence. The entire train car seemed to hold its breath. Ethan wasn't just quiet, he was calm, his eyes wide and curious, his mouth forming a small, wondering smile. Keisha looked down at him and felt her heart squeeze. "Hey there, little man," she whispered. "You just needed someone to listen, didn't you?" Jennifer was crying now, tears of relief and something deeper. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you, I don't know what you did, but thank you." Keisha smiled and carefully transferred Ethan back to his mother. "Sometimes they just need a change," she said gently. "Different arms, different heartbeat. You're doing great, Mama. Really." The train pulled into Keisha's stop. She grabbed her backpack and slipped out the doors, disappearing into the crowd, thinking nothing more of it except that she'd be late for her test. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. But Jennifer couldn't forget. She rode the rest of the way downtown in a daze, Ethan sleeping peacefully against her chest for the first time in weeks. When she got home that night, she told her assistant about it. The assistant, eager for something positive to share in the midst of the Harding family's drama, mentioned it to a friend who worked in media. Within 48 hours, the story had leaked. Mysterious girl calms billionaire heir on train. The headline was everywhere. Security footage from the train showed Keisha's face. Someone recognized her school uniform, and just like that, her privacy shattered. Keisha had no smartphone, just an old flip phone her grandmother insisted she carry for emergencies. She had no social media, no way to control the narrative spinning around her. By the end of the week, reporters were waiting outside her school. They shouted questions she didn't understand. "How did you do it? Did you know who the baby was? Are you trained in childcare?" Keisha kept her head down and walked faster, terrified and confused. Her grandmother fielded calls from news stations, politely declining every interview request. "We don't need attention," Miss Ruth said firmly. "The child did what any decent person would do. Leave us be." But the world doesn't leave good stories alone, especially when they involve billionaires and poor black girls in moments that look like miracles. The narrative grew, split into factions. Some praised Keisha as a hero. Others questioned her motives. Some pointed out the racial dynamics, the way kindness from black girls is often expected but rarely rewarded. And then everything got worse. Robert Harding III, who had been notably absent from his son's life, suddenly paid attention. Not because he cared about Ethan's well-being, but because his company was under federal investigation for financial fraud, and he needed a distraction. His lawyers crafted a statement suggesting that Keisha had acted without parental consent, that she had potentially put Ethan at risk, that Jennifer had been too distressed to make a sound decision. The statement stopped short of filing charges but hinted at legal action. It was calculated, cruel, designed to shift public attention from Robert's crimes to a fabricated controversy. Within days, Keisha received a summons to juvenile court. The charge was vague, something about reckless endangerment and unauthorized contact with a minor. It was ridiculous, barely legal, but it was real. Keisha sat in her grandmother's kitchen holding the paper, her hands shaking exactly like Jennifer's had shaken on that train. "I just helped," she whispered. "I just tried to help. Why is this happening?" Miss Ruth held her granddaughter close, fury and fear warring in her chest. "I know, baby. I know. But sometimes the world punishes us for being good. We're going to fight this. Do you hear me? We're going to fight." They couldn't afford a lawyer, not a real one. The public defender assigned to Keisha's case was overworked and underprepared, juggling dozens of cases with the enthusiasm of someone long defeated by the system. He told them to plead to a lesser charge, to apologize, to make it go away quietly. But Miss Ruth refused. "My granddaughter did nothing wrong," she said, her voice steel wrapped in velvet. "We will stand before that judge and tell the truth." The court date arrived on a cold January morning, 2 months after the train ride that had changed everything. Keisha wore her church dress, the navy blue one with buttons up the front, and her grandmother's pearl earrings. She was terrified, her stomach churning, but she held her head high the way Miss Ruth had taught her. The courtroom was smaller than she expected, fluorescent lights humming overhead, wooden benches worn smooth by countless bodies seeking justice or mercy. The judge, a middle-aged black woman named Judge Constance Miller, reviewed the file with an expression that gave nothing away. Keisha's public defender presented a weak defense, basically arguing that Keisha was a good kid who made a mistake in judgment. It felt like betrayal, like he was agreeing she'd done something wrong. Keisha's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but fear locked the words inside. Then the courtroom doors opened. Everyone turned. Jennifer Harding walked in, Ethan in her arms, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her face bare of makeup. The prosecutor stood, objecting to her presence, but Judge Miller raised a hand. "I'll allow it. Mrs. Harding, do you have something to say to this court?" Jennifer approached the bench, her son calm against her shoulder. She took a breath and began to speak, her voice quiet but steady. "Your Honor, I'm the mother. I'm the one who gave permission. I'm the one who was failing that day, who couldn't help my own child. That girl, Keisha, she didn't put my son at risk. She saved him. She saved both of us." Her voice cracked, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I was drowning. I had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. No support, no help, no hope. And this girl, this stranger, saw me. Really saw me. She didn't see a billionaire's wife, she saw a mother in pain." Jennifer turned to look at Keisha, meeting her eyes across the courtroom. "She didn't touch my baby without permission. I asked her to help. I begged her. And what she did wasn't reckless. It was the most careful, gentle, knowing thing anyone has done for me in years. She knew what Ethan needed because she paid attention, because she cared. And now she's being punished for it because my husband is trying to distract from his own crimes. He doesn't care about our son. He's using this court, using her to manipulate the media. And it's wrong." Judge Miller leaned forward, her fingers steepled. "Mrs. Harding, are you saying you support the dismissal of these charges?" Jennifer didn't hesitate. "I'm saying there should never have been charges. I'm saying Keisha Williams is a hero, and if this court punishes her, it punishes every person who's ever helped a stranger, every act of kindness that makes this world survivable." The courtroom was silent except for the hum of the lights and someone's muffled sob. Judge Miller looked at Keisha, really looked at her, and Keisha felt seen in a way that was terrifying and comforting at once. "Miss Williams," the judge said, "I've reviewed the evidence, including the train footage and witness statements. I see a young woman who acted with compassion and competence. I see a mother who was grateful for help. What I don't see is a crime. These charges are dismissed. Furthermore," she continued, her voice hardening, "I'm filing a report about the misuse of this court's time and resources for what appears to be a publicity stunt. Mr. Harding's legal team should be ashamed. Case closed." The gavel came down with a crack that sounded like freedom. Keisha felt her grandmother's arms around her, felt the trembling relief in both their bodies. Across the room, Jennifer was crying, holding Ethan close, whispering thank you to a God she'd stopped believing in. After the hearing, Jennifer approached Keisha and Miss Ruth in the hallway. They stood awkwardly for a moment, separated by so much but connected by one profound moment. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said. "I'm so sorry you went through this because of me." Keisha shook her head. "It wasn't because of you. You didn't do this." "I know," Jennifer said, "but I should have spoken up sooner. I was afraid of Robert, of what he'd do. I've been afraid for so long." She looked down at Ethan, who was watching Keisha with recognition and reaching for her. "But I'm not afraid anymore. This showed me I have to fight for my son, for the life we deserve. I'm filing for divorce. I'm taking control back. And I want to do something for you, to thank you. Not charity. Partnership." Over the following months, something beautiful emerged from the wreckage. Jennifer established a foundation supporting young women of color pursuing careers in maternal health, childcare, and music therapy. The first scholarship went to Keisha, funding her college education fully. Keisha was accepted into Spelman College with plans to study music therapy and maternal care, combining her two greatest loves. She wanted to help mothers and babies find connection, to ease the kind of suffering she'd witnessed on that train. Jennifer left Robert, taking Ethan and half the assets the court determined she was owed. She moved into a smaller apartment, nothing like the penthouse, but filled with light and laughter and the sound of Ethan's happy babbling. She and Keisha stayed in touch, not as patron and recipient, but as friends bound by a moment that changed both their trajectories. The media coverage shifted. What started as a viral moment became a deeper conversation about maternal mental health, about the support structures we fail to provide, about how poverty doesn't equal ignorance and wealth doesn't equal wisdom. A children's book was published, Keisha and the Quiet Baby, with proceeds going to postpartum depression research and support programs. Schools across the country used it to teach empathy. Miss Ruth cried the first time she read it to the twins, seeing her granddaughter's compassion immortalized in ink and watercolor. 2 years after that train ride, Keisha stood on Spelman's campus during her sophomore year, leading a workshop on infant soothing techniques for young mothers in the community. She taught them the hum, the sway, the heartbeat hold. She taught them to trust their instincts, to ask for help without shame, to see crying not as failure but as communication. One young mother, barely 18 with a 3-month-old daughter, stayed after to talk. "I saw your story," she said quietly. "When my baby won't stop crying and I feel like I'm losing my mind, I remember you. I remember that someone cared enough to help a stranger. Gives me hope." Keisha hugged her, this girl she'd just met, and felt the circle complete. That's what her grandmother meant. We're all chosen to understand someone sometime. We just have to be brave enough to try. Jennifer attended that workshop, Ethan toddling beside her, a happy, healthy 2-year-old with his mother's eyes and a smile that came easily. She watched Keisha teach and felt grateful in a way that transcended words. That train ride had been her rock bottom, the moment she either gave up or got up. Keisha had been the hand that reached down, not to pull her out, but to remind her she could climb. Afterward they had coffee while Ethan played with blocks. "How's school?" Jennifer asked. "Exhausting," Keisha laughed. "Amazing. Terrifying. Everything. I'm learning so much about trauma and attachment and how the first months shape everything. Makes me wish every mother had real support." "They will," Jennifer said firmly. "We're building it." The foundation just funded 3 new community centers with free childcare and mental health services. "We're hiring doulas to work with low-income mothers." "It's happening, Keisha. Because of what you started." Keisha shook her head. "What we started. You didn't have to turn your pain into purpose. You chose that." Jennifer smiled, watching her son stack blocks. "We both did. That's the point, isn't it? One person acts, another responds, and suddenly the world shifts a little. It's not magic, it's just humans remembering how to be human." The story could end there, but real life is messier and richer. Robert Harding III was eventually convicted of fraud and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He never met his son in any meaningful way, never acknowledged the harm he caused. Jennifer grieved the marriage she'd hoped for, then moved on, building a life centered on Ethan and her foundation work. She dated eventually, a kind teacher named Michael who loved kids and didn't care about her money. Keisha graduated with honors, went on to earn a master's in music therapy, and opened a practice specializing in maternal-infant mental health. She never forgot where she came from, always keeping sliding scale spots for families who couldn't afford care. Miss Ruth lived to see her granddaughter's success, holding on long enough to attend Keisha's graduate school graduation before passing peacefully in her sleep at 83. At the funeral, Jennifer came with Ethan, now 5 years old and understanding enough to be quiet and respectful. He held a dandelion he'd picked himself because he liked how it looked like the sun. He gave it to Keisha solemnly. "I'm sorry your grandma died," he said with the blunt honesty of children. "She must have been really nice because you're really nice." Keisha accepted the dandelion, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "She was the best person I ever knew," she told him. "She taught me that listening is loving and loving is living." Ethan nodded seriously. "When I'm sad, Mama says I can cry and someone will listen. Like you listened to me on the train even though I don't remember. You'll always be part of our family, Keisha. Always." Now years later, the 906 Metron eastbound still runs its route through the city. Different passengers, same rhythm, the eternal flow of humanity rushing toward wherever we think we need to be. Sometimes someone's baby cries. Sometimes passengers sigh and look away. But sometimes, more often now, someone asks if they can help. Someone offers a hand, a smile, a moment of shared humanity. The story of Keisha and Ethan has become part of the city's folklore, a reminder that we're all fragile, all struggling, all capable of saving each other in small, profound ways. What would you have done in Keisha's place? Have you ever met a stranger who changed your life in just one moment? Have you been that stranger for someone else without even knowing it? Think about the last time you saw someone struggling. Did you look away or lean in? There's no judgment here, only invitation. The world is full of crying babies, literal and metaphorical, full of people desperate to be seen and heard. We can't help everyone, can't solve every problem. But we can do what Keisha did. We can pay attention. We can offer presence. We can remember that behind every difficult moment is a human being doing their best with what they have. Let us know in the comments how this story made you feel. Tell us about a time someone helped you when you needed it most, or a time you helped someone else. These aren't just stories, they're mirrors. They reflect who we are and who we could be. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, subscribe for more true stories that shine light on the hidden heroes among us. Share this with someone who needs to remember that kindness matters, that small acts echo, that we're all connected in ways we can't always see. And remember, the next time you hear a baby cry, it might just be a call to step forward. Not because you have all the answers, but because your presence might be the answer someone's praying for. From a train in November to a foundation changing lives, from a teenager with nothing but compassion to a movement reminding us what matters, this is what happens when we choose to care. This is what happens when we listen. This is what happens when we remember that we're all in this together, billionaires and broke kids, mothers and strangers, all of us just trying to make it through the day with a little grace and a lot of help. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being the kind of person who stayed until the end, who wanted to know how the story turned out. That says something beautiful about you. Now go be someone's Keisha. The world is waiting.